Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury. Thank you so much for joining us today and making TeacherCast your home for professional development. This is Digital Learning Today, episode number 52. I have a fantastic guest on the show talking all about how she was able to work with youth who used to be incarcerated, and she's going to share with us her journey to help out those students, and now how she's on a mission to not only help out students, but educators worldwide. She's also got a fantastic book we're going to be talking about, State of the End. This is a great episode for you guys. If you're new here to the show, my name is Jeff Bradbury. I have been an educator for the last 30 years and working with not only educators, but students, and I am here to help you guys out. Don't forget to head on over to teachercast.net to check out all of our great instructional coaching resources, Microsoft resources, Google resources. If you're looking to upgrade your classroom this year, check out all the great stuff over on teachercast.net. My guest today is an adjunct professor at the City College of New York. She's also the director of continuous improvement at the Urban Assembly, and she's also the author of a recent and amazing book called The Positive Effect for Educators. I want to bring on today my good friend, Miss Channon Essex. Shannon, how are you today? Welcome to TeacherCast.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. I'm doing very, very well today. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you on. We were talking a little bit about New York and now places that you're going to these days. And obviously, look, it is the new year. We've got a new adventure here. One of the things that I have been having conversations to many teachers and instructional coaches is this conversation of burnout. It's halfway through the year. It's been a crazy year. It's been a hard year. I know you know a little bit about burnout. What do you say to teachers these days when they're sitting there going, I don't know if I can do this?
I say two things. I say the fact that you're here means that you can do it, right? And I also say that it's really important to find ways to fill your own cup so that you can be the best version of yourself when you step in front of our students. Those are my two biggest pieces. And what that looks like, what it means to actually excavate what it looks like to take care of yourself with all the wide spectrum of needs that students have, particularly like in the climate and the world that we're living in today. What that looks like for an educator does require some energy and some thought, and oftentimes teachers don't have that. So we start small, right? We start small with the little pieces of guidance, but it's more so just opening up the way for that conversation, which oftentimes is not being had in school spaces.
You know, I love that answer, and we're going to be deep diving into this, but I wanted to start there today, Shannon, because so many educators are out there listening to this and going, I don't know if I can survive the next year, the 2 years. The administration's changing. What's that going to mean? They're thinking about all these different things. Let's back up for a second. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am a native New Yorker, born and raised in Queens, East Elmhurst, New York. I actually switched careers midway through my trajectory, and found myself in education. And I had been working for a corporate training company and got laid off, and decided then and there that I was never going to devote that much of myself, my heart, my passion, to something or to an entity that did not spark or resonate with my own values. And that's how I kind of started exploring what it meant to actually go in the direction of what inspired me. And at the time, that was youth. So I started volunteering and had the amazing opportunity to volunteer for an amazing organization that at the time was underneath the Bloomberg administration, which was the New York City Justice Corps. And that experience was the catalyst for what led me into the formal K through 12 education space. After that experience, I became a special education teacher in New York City, teaching high school and middle school. Then I had the opportunity to go on and be part of a founding team to begin and start a school in the South Bronx, where I led for 5 years. And now I have the pleasure of being able to work across schools. So little by little, my experience and my influence has widened. And so now that I'm here in this space, I'm really excited to be able to have this conversation because it comes with a wealth of personal experience that I have to offer of some of the same questions and concerns that educators are experiencing right now.
That is an amazing story, and one that I'm sure resonates with many people who are listening to this. This idea of career change, moving forward, believing in yourself. A few days ago, we just launched a episode of the Jeff Bradbury Show talking about being an entrepreneur and making that career turn, that left turn and going with it. What were some of those challenges that you had when you were sitting there facing the fact that you didn't know what was going on tomorrow and you needed to make a new life for yourself?
Well, I think that for me, I started to understand that there are always two ways one can consider something. One can consider it from the reality standpoint. You know, I have these bills, I have finances, I have rent, I have a car payment, right? And that was just me at the time because I did not have a family, right? So if you add on the layers of that for what it means for an individual that does, right, then there's added concerns. That is always there and that is real. But I also believe that on the other side of that, there is a real opportunity to consider, what if this is an opportunity? What if this is an opportunity that is in the costume of something that is really hard or challenging? And what if I follow this? And what if I choose to believe that in following this, if it is meant for me, that things will line up in a way that will propel me forward and also give me everything that I need along the journey? And I think that is something that oftentimes in the world we live in, we are oftentimes forced to look at what is the reality, what's in front of you. Everybody's talking about what the reality is, what the reality is. But the truth of the matter is the reality of what things are is old news. And if we stay fixated on what is, how can we actually open up the door for the possibility of what could be?
I think that's beautiful. And, you know, I'm harkering back to my last couple years. You know, a year ago, recently, I was also sitting here with my family going, I don't have anything to do tomorrow. And I had to restart myself and I had to reset my career and I had to re-envision what the future was going to be. And it's been an amazing year. I want to ask you about that transition there. What was it like starting in education, working with adults, working with students, not being in corporate world, being in education world?
You know, I had always had a inclination to venture into spaces where there were youth and young adults. I had always been drawn to those spaces. And in fact, in my past career as trainer, I think that was my first taste of what it meant to educate people, even though the context was completely different, right? To be able to impart something to someone to make them feel better about themselves, to be able to leave someone better than how you found them in some way. That was something that deeply resonated with me and gave me so much joy. So the transition into education kind of was built upon that knowledge that I had in myself of what resonates with me. In terms of the experience of educating youth and taking into consideration their stories, the narratives that are most common among the young people that I was working with. That was the hardest part because it forced me to take a very deep look at myself in a way that I had not done. And oftentimes when we do things for the first time, it always feels like it's the hardest thing to do, right? So my experience in the New York City Justice Corps, where I had the opportunity to join the fight of recidivism, working with previously incarcerated youth between the ages of 17 and 24. These were young people that essentially were just coming out of being incarcerated and trying to go back into the world and contribute to it in a positive way. And I definitely went in with, I'm going to help them do this. But my mindset did not, for one moment at the time, consider what it meant to understanding first. I think that sometimes as educators, we fall into the trap of wanting to unconsciously go in and save things, go in and fix things, right? And that's from a yearning to want to make things better. But if we don't understand the landscape, if we don't understand or are curious about the stories and the whys and the hows and how someone arrives at a certain point where they're sitting right in front of you and you have the opportunity to be a catalyst for change in their lives, if you're not curious about that, then oftentimes you make very large mistakes that can have huge costs, particularly for the young people that are sitting in front of you, and particularly in the climate of the world that we're in now. So for me, that experience solidified my journey into education. And it was from that I decided, like, okay, not only do I want to be an educator and a teacher, but I want to be a special education teacher.
And I think that's an amazing journey that you were on. When you're sitting there for the first time, or even not the first time, and you're working with students who, as you said, 17 through 24, and they've had a very difficult journey up to that point.
Yeah.
How do you approach that? How do you approach them? How do you start to form those relationships so that way you can see a tunnel before they do, maybe.
Yeah. I think that admittedly at the time, I had a lot of blind spots. I made a lot of assumptions. The young people that I worked with looked like me. We could have been relatives. And I think that I leaned on that as a means to give me the confidence, like, oh, they're like me. Which was very ignorant. And like I think about it now and I shudder. But it's okay because I learned what I needed to learn. And it actually prepared me in the best way to actually go into New York City public schools. So I went in assuming that I would have this automatic connection that would allow me to cultivate trust with them. And when I got there, they let me know in all manner of ways over a period of maybe 3 months that was not going to fly with them because I came in with the intent to fix, not with the intent to empower. And so when I started understanding that the combination of my ignorance alongside my arrogance and alongside my biases were all in the way and building a wall that I kept thinking I was breaking down. And it wasn't until I understood that I needed to, one, be my most authentic self. And that meant to drop the persona of being a facilitator of learning. Like I'm a human being first, right? And we have multi-dimensional intersections of our identity, right? That play out in educational spaces because it's on stage, right? You're spending how much of your day with students? Oftentimes they spend more time with you than they do with their family at home. So to be able to hold up a facade of who you think you should be as a facilitator of learning becomes harder and harder as the year wears on, as time wears on. And so for me in that experience, I understood that I needed to find a way to connect. And in order to do that, I had to build trust. And in order to build trust, I had to stop trying to fix and first make an attempt to understand. That was the entry point for what changed everything.
Give us an example of a story that really resonates for other people, right?
Oh.
So something you worked with a student, you had an impact. What's that teachable moment that comes to mind when you think about your time doing that?
Sure. So I think about the first month that I was working there. I was in charge of facilitating work readiness. So I thought that what that meant was to look the part. So I went in with a suit. I went in with my folders. I went in with resume templates and proceeded to get up in front of the class and talk about the tenets of work readiness. Now, these young people were looking at me like, first of all, she wants to talk about work readiness, but does she even consider what it means to try to get a job when you have a record? Has she considered what it means to be able to support a family while trying to navigate that? All these different considerations. And so one story that sticks out was a moment where I was standing at the front of the classroom and I was writing with a dry erase board in the front. And I heard a student make some sort of disrespectful comment. And in that moment, I had been working so hard in my mind to cultivate relationships. And I was going home every day, with a pity party, talking about, why don't they like me? I'm trying so hard. I'm showing up every day. And so in this moment, when that happened, it really triggered for me like, okay, clearly the students at this point do not respect me. But why do I think that they should? Have I set the tone for what it means to have respect in this space? Have I communicated what my expectations are? Have I communicated how I see them and what I believe is possible for them? I haven't done any of that. So if I haven't set the tone and set the expectations, should I be mad that they don't have any? Isn't that my job? Right? So in that moment, I shut the whole entire class down. I remember I had a chair that I was sitting in at a desk and I pulled the chair from the desk, sat in front of the room and pretty much like dropped the educator persona and really was just like, listen, this is why I'm here. This is what I'm seeking to do. But the only way that this is going to work is if we do it together. And I'm realizing that. And so I want to learn about you. And that was the moment that opened the door for a conversation that was engaging on both sides because suddenly I was not the expert. I was trying to become an expert in their lives, in their stories, in the circumstances. And that took time. And I went from going home every day, feeling defeated and feeling like I made a mistake, to cultivating some of the most amazing, transformative relationships with those young people that I will take with me everywhere. I mean, the students went from, rolling their eyes and sucking their teeth at me to digging my car out of the snow. Greeting me in the morning, being like, Miss, you want something from the store? I'm going to get something to eat. Would you like something? These young people invited me into their families. I got invited to baby showers, graduations, barbecues, because I just wanted to learn about them. And then in a responsive manner, offer supports that were indicative of my understanding of their stories and where they were, as opposed to this cookie cutter idea, one size fits all. This is what you do to get back out into the working world. So that moment and that experience changed everything.
So you in one instance learned the first rule of teaching, which is show them that you care.
Yes. Show them that you care.
Through that started you on your journey, and now you have this amazing book that's been recently published called The Positive Effect for Educators: Maximizing Student Performance with ACT. Before we dive in, what is ACT?
So ACT stands for Accept, Create, and Teach. And it actually is an acronym that my co-author, April Sobral, who I collaborated with along with Angie Costa to make this book come together. April is very well known in the retail world and kind of created this acronym to support training and facilitation of supports in her world. And April and I are friends, and we started having this ongoing conversation every time we would link up around the correlation between how she was teaching others to be better managers and the things that I was doing in the education space to make myself a better teacher. And there was this connection that made the ACT framework applicable in the spaces where I was, which is how this book kind of came together. The truth of the matter is that I was implementing ACT unbeknownst to me, and had been for years, and had been seeing the impact of what it meant to accept yourself as an educator, which means you got to be real, right, with yourself. And then once you accept, and then you come from a place of being real with yourself, it enables you to accept your students. Right? You can't do what you don't offer yourself first, at least not well, and at least not consistently. Then from that space, then you create the environment, you create the lesson plans, you create the curriculum, right? And then from that, the next step is now you teach it, right? So that's how the ACT framework came to be within the space of education.
I think that is an amazing framework, and we're going to make sure that we have all the links over on our show notes over on Digital Learning Today. You can find it all of our podcasts over on teachercast.net/podcasts. And talk to us a little bit about through the journey that you went through for creating this book, launching it, maybe any of the feedback that you're getting from educators after they've gone through the ACT process themselves.
So I'll start with the feedback. The feedback has been amazing. I am a first-time author. So anytime you take something that is so attached to your heart and your passions, it's a really vulnerable experience, right? To put it down on paper and to share it with the world. And also I was very mindful of the fact that, the positive effects for educators, the whole entire framing of it is to be a support to teachers, right? But the truth is that any person that chooses to be an educator now has a heart of gold, period. And I really do believe that. All of them. Doesn't matter how long they stay. But what happens when you become a teacher and then you get into education in the formal space and you start to see all the holes and the cracks, right? And you start to recognize that as an educator, you don't have the support that would most benefit you beyond anything pedagogically related. So we have all the curriculums in the world. We have all the professional development in the world. We have weekly PD that is being facilitated in the school space. But if no one is creating a coaching space for teachers to be able to say, okay, this is the teacher that you want to be, Have you accepted where you are? Where are you? Let's talk about that. What are the things that are the most uncomfortable for you as an educator that show up in the classroom space? How are you pouring into yourself to ensure that you're the best version of you before you go into the classroom, right? These conversations oftentimes are not commonplace because there's so much to do. And so you can have a teacher that starts out in the profession with the best of intentions and really wants to be in it for the long haul, but loses momentum and fire because of all that is asked, but at the same time, because not enough is given, right, to teachers. So this process was really like a labor of love for me to be able to create something like this, to open the conversation like, hey, I know that you're getting told that you have a task list of things that you have to complete on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis. And you're going to try your best to do those things. But also, I want to open up the invitation for you, educator, to consider what it means to be the best version of yourself and offer you something that really hones in on you being able to do that.
I'm curious, was your journey through writing this book similar at all to when you changed careers and you had to come up with what's that new version of you? In both sets, you've got a blank canvas and you have to figure out what to do with it.
You know, in some ways it's similar, but in some ways it's very different. It's similar because it's a brand new space, a brand new environment, what it means to author a book, what it means to take your experiences and put them down on paper and then have it published and share it with the world. That's new. But what I'm talking about is not. So it's very familiar territory. When I was a leader in school spaces, most of the coaching that I did provide to the teachers that I did work with revolved around this idea of how can I, as an administrator, pour into you or give you some guidance that has nothing to do with pedagogy or training or, you know, making sure your lesson plans. Like, if we address what it is that you need as an educator to be the best version of yourself, to serve the students that you are called to actually educate, then everything that flows from what you do out of that will be golden, because it will be from a space of you being the best version of yourself. So if you're able to accept yourself, accept your biases, have an awareness of what happens when you step into this classroom space, have an awareness of how students may trigger you, right? Because you yourself have some unresolved things, right, that come up and show up in the classroom space. And there's this discomfort, all these different things that oftentimes are not talked about, because in a professional space, similar to education, but everywhere, it's like, this is work, outside of work is separate, right? And that is true. But the difference in education, I would even venture medicine is probably similar. The hours and amount of time that you are spending in collaboration with others, whether it's students, patients, you're spending so much time. So that facade of who you want to be drops and it becomes fragile, if it is the case that you're not pouring in to develop yourself to be the best person to step into that role. So different space, but similar conversation.
Talking today to Channon Essex all about her new book, The Positive Effect for Educators, Maximizing Student Performance with ACT. And Shannon, here we are. It's the middle of January, and we're looking forward to a great 2025 and beyond. I want to ask you one last question here. What are you looking forward to this year, personally, professionally? What's on the horizon for you?
So I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation around the book and what it can provide to teachers that are still in it, right? I'm also really looking forward to potentially writing another book and potentially launching a podcast, which is also really, really exciting. And it's really rooted in the same tenets of what it means to be the best version of yourself and what it means to wrestle with yourself so that you can go out into the world and make it better. I also think something that I'm very excited about is the potential to be able to widen my influence and do the thing that I love the most, which is, again, going into spaces and leaving people better than how I found them. And if I can't leave a person better than how I found them, I can definitely leave a place better than how I found it.
And you certainly are doing that in New York City, and congratulations for everything. Where can people reach out and get a hold of you these days?
So folks can reach out on LinkedIn for sure. I'm also on social media on Facebook and on Instagram. So you can definitely reach out. And also inside the book, there's more information around my email address, as well as the contact information for my two other amazing co-authors. And we're really excited to continue the conversation and even collaborate with educators, teachers, and schools in service of supporting our students.
Would love to have you back on with your co-host to continue this conversation. And if anybody out there is looking to reach out to Shannon, would love to have you guys do that. Of course, you can find out more information over on Digital Learning Today podcast. This is episode number 52. And we want to say thank you guys for being here and listening to this great conversation today with somebody who is absolutely trailblazing in her field. Shannon, thank you so much for your time today. We wish you the best of luck this year, and please come back on the show in the future.
Thank you so much.
And we want to say thank you guys again out there for making TeacherCast your home for professional development. There's many different ways that you can reach out and be a part of our TeacherCast Educational Network. Find us over on Twitter, find us on Blue Sky, hit us up over on YouTube. And of course, we would love to have you guys like and subscribe to this show and share it with your colleagues. And that wraps up this episode of Digital Learning Today. On behalf of Channon Essex and everybody here on TeacherCast, my name is Jeff Bradbury, reminding you guys to keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.
You've been listening to the TeacherCast Educational Network, hosted by Jeff Bradbury. Please reach out to the show with all of your questions on Twitter @TeacherCast or online at www.teachercast.net. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And please take a moment to write a review in the App Store.